Eastern, and I came to the U.S. like at a very young age. I was 6 years old, and from the time we came in Chicago, there were a lot of other Middle Eastern people. There were a lot of like people from all different races, and I remember everyone got along. Everyone would mix together and like hang out together.
I am multiracial, biracial, but have been white passing for most of my life. I think this in-betweenness, the straddling of looking a certain way but having a lived experience that doesn't precisely match that, complicates and muddies my perceptions and attitudes.
I worked very closely with an African-American teacher. We team taught, but one person does not represent an entire society.
Being around people from all different cultures, being around people from like all groups, having the experience to like talk to different people. So yeah, it was hard for me to be racist because I saw the best and worst qualities of all people.
Being white and white passing has afforded me privileges and a certain sense of ease that my own father didn't enjoy.
My first memory of racism is of an experience I had when I was 7. My family moved from Chicago to a small town in southern Illinois, very white and mostly working class. When I was called into the principal's office on the first day of school, I wasn't prepared for a barrage of questions about my ethnic background. The principal asked me where we were from, and when I said Chicago, he said no, but where are you really from? He also asked what language we spoke at home and what my parents did for a living. And the entire year we lived in that small town, it definitely had a negative effect on how I perceived myself because it was very destabilizing to suddenly be in an environment where you don't feel any kind of cultural attachment or have any kind of, family support and things that would normally come along with like a good community.
College is where it opened up a little bit more for me to see that I had believed some of those stereotypes, and that's where I started to change my viewpoint. But this was in the 60s and early 70s, so there was still a lot of segregation. So there was a lot of, I think, prejudice in the time I grew up.
It just made me stop to think that things are a lot more layered. It made me think that there's room in my perception for a little bit of a change.
I was really glad to get out of my comfort zone, where as a white man, I don't feel like I can speak for women, right? Or speak for people of color. Like, they can speak for themselves and they're perfectly capable of doing it. Why would I assume I should do it?
I thought I was immune from the white privilege because I've never thought of myself as racist, and people who are this and that. And the whole experience just taught me that, yes, I do have white privilege, and there's so much more. And I kind of opened up in myself and saw what was lacking on a pretty big scale for someone who considered themselves to never be racist and everyone's equal.
Not being a racist isn't enough. I can't just think, oh, in my heart, I'm not a racist. Or you have to actually do work and educate yourself, put a lot of effort into practicing anti-racism.
For me, it was a moment of like, oh, I have these little hard places in my past that, I really have to crack open. On October 19th, the New York Times Magazine had a cover image of Angela Davis on it. I was really surprised by my reaction. It filled me with many fears and just memories of, when I was younger and growing up in South Bend, where there were riots. And Angela Davis was all wrapped up in that for me. She was a communist and a Black Panther and a terrorist, and she had been arrested for murder. And so that's where she was in my mind. That memory of her had not moved, hadn't changed. I had no idea who she really was as a person. She was stuck in my, 12-year-old memory as this very two-dimensional person. It took me about 3 weeks to be able to really get myself to sit down and read the profile of her, which was an amazing profile. I learned a lot about her and about my misperceptions. Some of those stay with us. They're still there, and we had to really confront that and decide to learn more about this person so that I could have a more well-rounded picture of who she is and who she was and what she has done with her life, and what a real leader she is.
An NPR speaker who was having a conversation with his white friend. And this NPR speaker is a Pulitzer Prize winner whose name is Jose Antonio Vargas. He said, "People of color always get asked where you're from. Like, where are you from? And I have a habit of asking white people where they're from. So I asked a friend where he was from, and he said, well, I'm American. I said, yeah, I know. And then he goes, well, I'm white. And white is not a country, I say to him. Like, where are you from? And then, how did, your ancestors get here? And what papers did they have? And what was their visa process like? And was there a multi-billion-dollar enforcement agency like ICE, trying to lock people up because they didn't have their papers? And he said, I don't know. What a privilege to not have to know. What a privilege to have to say, oh, I'm a citizen because I was born here. But all these other people, they have to earn it.
I listened to a podcast about empathy and storytelling and using those things to reach out to people who are quite racist, like violently racist. It was a really powerful story, and the podcast had actually a lot more to it about using empathy and storytelling and really connecting with people as being like really the best and only way to bring people around who have really deeply ingrained violently racist attitudes. And it was, on the one hand, it's kind of like optimism because it's like, hey, it can be done. But then pessimism because but really, how often can you connect with people like that? Like, when do you actually have a chance to do it?
Dr. Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility. This is the video, the speech I listened to, and there was the part of it that changed my perception of myself. One of the reasons that white people say to prove that they're not racist is I am from Europe. So that's me. I used to think I'm from Russia. There's no racism in Russia, so I'm not racist. So yeah, that really changed it for me, and I guess I realized that racism does not require visa, and it's everywhere. And I started thinking about my experiences back in Russia and stereotypes about, or I'm racist towards them. I don't know, it just made me think, and now I know that being Russian does not mean that you cannot be racist, or being from a European country does not mean that you cannot be racist. It cannot be one of the things you say to prove that you're not.
The two resources that I found most powerful to me, the first one was Jacqueline Battalora's Birth of a White Nation, in which she analyzed texts and laws from early American history onward to really analyze how the concept of whiteness, first of all, came into being, and then how the concept of how it became the superior status artificially, almost through the letters and everything, gave me a deep-rooted context of racism. And then into the present moment, Jay Smooth's TED Talk at Hampshire College, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Discussing Race, was really helpful for me personally, because this was an issue for me and for anyone else, that maintaining a flawless appearance of lack of racism by not talking about it is not the solution. The thing to do that is more helpful is to be more open about talking about race, trying, making mistakes, and accepting criticism graciously to get better and working constantly, like Andrew said earlier, towards anti-racism.
There was an article that I really liked, and it was called Explaining White Privilege to a Broke White Person, and that was written by Gina Crossley Corcoran. I like this article because when I first started the challenge, I was very open-minded to what I might learn, but I was also a little nervous. And I was nervous because as a person who does not like confrontation, I was worried that the term anti-racism meant that you had to be brash and aggressive and asserting your views. But this article made me realize that anti-racism does not mean that a person needs to be confrontational and get in the face of others who do behave in a racist manner, and asks you to act as an ally, to be cognizant of differences, and to realize that systems of oppression do exist.
So in the past, I was what I would call, Midwestern nice. I would tend to ignore these kinds of behaviors because it wasn't my business really. But that wasn't anti-racist, right? And it wasn't really appropriate. I think just doing or saying something, anything to interrupt this, whenever you see or hear someone being racist or making racist comments or microaggressions, whatever you can do to interrupt that is powerful. Even if that consequence is very small, like, me glaring at them or me giving them a stone face or just saying like, that's not appropriate. It's still, you're still saying something, you're making it known that that's not appropriate, that you don't agree, that maybe they need to check themselves and not say these sorts of things. Saying anything is better than just being silent.
So I decided to start journaling and keeping kind of like my own reflective focus sheet notes after appointments. It holds me accountable to like really being conscious of what I'm doing in an appointment, but then also being able to kind of hold myself accountable afterwards to say like, where can I improve? And also makes me better able to participate in conversations about this afterwards. And so I feel like these reflective sort of focus sheets will help with some of that.
When dealing with students, when we're talking about their language use in an appointment, that I plan on never using phrases like the proper way, because I don't want to give them the impression that I think that they are less than because they used a different way to say something. And instead I want to focus on the message behind the words, so kind of focus less on the grammar. Ask them questions about the choice of words they use and not assuming that their choice was the wrong choice.
Always ask people open-ended questions, especially when working with students. I always appreciate if people ask me open-ended questions and try to learn about me. I'm just going to make sure to make that a habit going forward.
Creating and adding some videos or resources to our webpage on the Learning Commons or on the WRSA webpage on how to avoid biases and generalizations in academic writing, which students can access as both something for their academic use and personal anti-racist use.
Trainings about revolving around race and racism. We could also run like a virtual book club to discuss books specifically around race and anti-racism. What would you do scenarios? So in WRSA we have a wiki, and we could post about certain situations, maybe like a student appointment, whether that actually happened or not, that pertain to a topic like this, and coaches could chime in about different potential ways of handling situations.
Continuing to educate ourselves on these issues and partnering with other COD programs or initiatives to bring awareness and or enact change around issues of social justice and equity.
Dr. Moore's advice about stepping back, right? If you're generally a talker, which I'm going to say I am, practice stepping back and listening more, and not just before your challenge. This is something I was working on, but your challenge has like really brought that home to me. And why? Because because there's just so much more I need to become aware of, right? And I can do that. My students can do that. I can learn so much from listening to my students and my colleagues. Becoming aware of my white privilege, like that I have been given at all moments, just helps me to not project my lived experience onto other individuals, and to just be sensitive to that the world is not me. And I just like Dr. Moore has said that the goal is to be a learner and not a knower. I think I've kind of tried to be that, a lifelong learner, but I that's what my specific goal is now too after this challenge.
It's very doable. I mean, I feel like that would be my big takeaway from it, was that there was just a lot of resources once you start looking for it. And I think I'd just be very encouraging about how really doable it is once you find the eye for looking for things that kind of fit into the challenge. And there's just too much to not do it, I guess.
Be very realistic about what your schedule is. On certain days that you get very busy, you might forget, and then you feel guilty. So even if you cannot commit to a daily activity, I think that even if you complete one activity or review one source every week, it will keep the topic fresh in your mind, and it keeps you in a continuous state of learning.
You may be uncomfortable and that your discomfort may not go away, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it.